In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Georgetown, Texas, Sofia Delgado's life appeared picture-perfect to the outside world. Her charming two-story home, with its well-kept lawn and neatly trimmed hedges, was the envy of neighbors. But inside its walls, Sofia felt the suffocating weight of silence. It wasn't always like this. Once, her marriage to Adrian Delgado had been filled with laughter and love. But over time, the spark had faded, replaced by the cold reality of long, lonely nights and a husband who seemed more devoted to his work than to her. Adrian, 35, was a successful businessman, often commuting to nearby Austin to manage his growing real estate firm. His dedication to providing a comfortable life for Sofia was undeniable. Yet, in his pursuit of stability, he had unknowingly left his wife emotionally stranded. Sofia, at 32, had given up her career as an artist to support Adrian's dreams. She'd traded her brushes and canvases for a role as the perfect homemaker, but the emptiness in her heart had grown impossible to ignore. June 2023 was a turning point for Sofia. The summer heat pressed down heavily on Georgetown, mirroring the stifling isolation in her home. Sofia spent her days tending to her garden or volunteering at the local community center, desperate for connection. But even the vibrant blooms of her rose bushes couldn't fill the void left by Adrian's absence. Their conversations had dwindled to routine exchanges about groceries and bills, and Sofia couldn't remember the last time he had asked how she was feeling. One scorching afternoon, as Sofia knelt in the garden pulling weeds, the sound of a familiar voice startled her. "Need a hand?" She looked up to see Mateo Delgado, Adrian's younger brother, leaning casually against the fence. At 28, Mateo was the antithesis of Adrian. Where Adrian was serious and meticulous, Mateo was carefree and impulsive, his boyish grin and easy charm making him the life of any gathering. Sofia wiped the sweat from her brow, her lips curving into a small smile. "Just trying to keep busy," she replied, pushing back a strand of hair that had escaped her braid. Mateo had always been a frequent visitor, but recently, his appearances had become more regular. Initially, it seemed innocent enough, helping Sofia fix a broken fence or sharing stories about his latest adventures. But Sofia found herself looking forward to his visits more than she cared to admit. Mateo brought something into her life that she hadn't felt in years: attention. Where Adrian barely noticed the subtle changes she made to her hair or the new dress she wore, Mateo's compliments were quick and genuine. "You shouldn't have to do all this alone," Mateo said, grabbing a spade and kneeling beside her. His presence was disarmingly warm, and Sofia found herself laughing at his jokes, something she hadn't done in months. As the weeks passed, Mateo's visits became a fixture of Sofia's routine. He'd stop by with fresh lemonade, offer to mow the lawn, or simply sit with her on the porch, exchanging stories about their lives. Sofia told herself it was harmless, just a brother-in-law helping out. But deep down, she knew better. She felt the flutter of excitement when she heard his car pull into the driveway, the way her heart quickened at his casual touch. One evening, as the golden Texan sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sofia and Mateo sat on the porch steps, sipping iced tea. The conversation drifted from light-hearted banter to something more personal. Mateo spoke of his struggles living in Adrian's shadow, how he always felt like the second choice in their family. Sofia, in turn, shared her frustrations with Adrian's growing distance. "He doesn't see me anymore," Sofia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just here. Like a piece of furniture he walks past every day." Mateo's gaze softened, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, he reached out, placing his hand over hers. "You deserve to be seen, Sofia. To be appreciated." The words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Sofia felt her resolve waver. For the first time in years, she felt truly understood. The weight of her isolation lifted, replaced by something dangerously intoxicating. From that evening onward, their connection deepened. What started as shared moments of vulnerability began to blur the lines of propriety. Matteo's playful teasing carried a new edge, his casual touches lingered just a second too long, and Sophia found herself unable to pull away. But in the back of her mind, a quiet voice warned her, this was a path she shouldn't tread. It was wrong. It was reckless. And yet, Sophia couldn't deny the thrill of feeling alive again, the way Matteo's presence shattered the monotony of her days. Unbeknownst to Sophia, this newfound connection was about to unravel her carefully constructed life. In the shadows of their growing bond lay the seeds of betrayal, jealousy, and consequences far more devastating than she could ever imagine. As the summer days rolled on, the heat in Georgetown wasn't just in the air, it was in Sophia's heart, ignited by a forbidden flame that threatened to consume everything in its path. By July, Matteo's presence at the Delgado household had become routine. Sophia told herself it was just a coincidence that he seemed to drop by whenever Adrian was out. Yet, deep down, she knew better. Matteo's timing was too perfect, his gestures too intentional. Whether it was fixing a squeaky door hinge or bringing her coffee from her favorite cafe, Matteo had become more than just a helpful brother-in-law. He was a source of comfort in a life that had grown unbearably cold. The summer heat in Georgetown was relentless, and Sophia often found herself retreating indoors during the hottest hours of the day. It was on one such afternoon that Matteo showed up unannounced, carrying a bag of groceries. "I thought you could use some company," he said, flashing his easy smile. Sophia hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. She knew she should have told him it wasn't appropriate, that Adrian wouldn't approve. But the truth was, she didn't want him to leave. They ended up in the kitchen, chopping vegetables together for dinner. It was a mundane activity, yet it felt charged with an undercurrent of tension. Sophia noticed the way Matteo stood closer than necessary, how his arm occasionally brushed against hers. She told herself it was innocent, but her heart raced every time their hands accidentally touched. "Adrian's lucky to have you," Matteo said, breaking the silence. "If I had someone like you in my life, I'd never take them for granted." The words hit Sophia like a jolt. She tried to laugh it off, but there was a sincerity in Matteo's voice that made her chest tighten. For a brief moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to be with someone who truly saw her, someone who made her feel alive. That evening, as Matteo was leaving, he turned to her at the door. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you can count on me." Sophia watched him walk to his car, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She felt the first pangs of guilt creeping in, but they were quickly overshadowed by the intoxicating thrill of his attention. Days turned into weeks, and Sophia found herself looking forward to Matteo's visits more than she cared to admit. The boundaries between them blurred with every shared laugh, every lingering glance. What started as casual companionship had become something more, something Sophia couldn't fully control. It was during one of their secret outings to the Stillwater Lake, a secluded spot just outside of town, that the dam finally broke. They had gone there under the pretense of picking wildflowers for the garden, but the atmosphere between them was anything but innocent. The lake's surface glistened under the late afternoon sun, and the air was thick with unspoken tension. As they sat on a fallen log near the water's edge, Sophia opened up in a way she hadn't with anyone in years. She spoke about her frustrations with Adrian, about how invisible she felt in her own home. Matteo listened intently, his gaze never wavering. "You deserve more than this," he said softly, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Sophia's breath hitched at the contact. She knew she should pull away, but her body betrayed her. The world seemed to blur around them as Matteo leaned in, his lips brushing against hers. The kiss was tentative at first, as if they were testing the boundaries of what was already forbidden. But it quickly deepened, fueled by months of suppressed longing. When they finally pulled apart, Sophia felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Guilt gnawed at the edges of her euphoria, but it couldn't extinguish the fire that Matteo had ignited within her. "This is wrong," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "I know," Matteo replied, his hand still resting on hers. "But it doesn't feel wrong when I'm with you." Sophia wanted to believe him, wanted to lose herself in the fantasy of being with someone who made her feel wanted. But the reality of her situation loomed over her like a dark cloud. As their affair deepened, Sophia and Matteo became adept at hiding their secret. They stole moments whenever they could, quiet dinners when Adrian worked late, stolen kisses in the hallway, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. Each meeting was a risk, but the danger only heightened the thrill. Still, Sophia couldn't escape the nagging voice in her head, the one that reminded her of the vows she had made to Adrian. She found herself oscillating between exhilaration and shame, trapped in a cycle of desire and regret. Matteo, too, seemed to wrestle with his own demons. While he appeared confident and carefree on the surface, there were moments when Sophia caught glimpses of vulnerability in his eyes. It was as if he was searching for something he couldn't quite grasp, a validation that went beyond their illicit connection. But the cracks in their facade began to show. Sophia noticed the way Matteo lingered too long during family gatherings, how his gaze would follow her across the room. And then there were the whispers, the subtle glances and knowing smiles from the neighbors who had seen them together too often. Georgetown was a small town, and secrets had a way of slipping through the cracks. Adrian, oblivious at first, started to pick up on the subtle changes in Sophia's behavior. She seemed distracted, her laughter forced, and she avoided his touch. His suspicions grew stronger one evening when he came home early and found Sophia and Matteo laughing together in the living room. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about the scene, but something about their shared intimacy felt off. As Adrian watched them from the doorway, his heart sank. He didn't want to believe it, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted. What he didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The storm brewing in the Delgado household was about to explode, and no one would escape unscathed. In Sophia's heart, the line between love, desire, and betrayal had already blurred beyond recognition. And in Matteo's, the fire of jealousy and revenge burned brighter with each passing day. By early September, the tension in the Delgado household had reached a breaking point. Adrian's suspicions had grown unbearable, and the once unshakable trust he had in Sophia now felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Every glance, every whisper from the neighbors seemed to confirm his fears. Something wasn't right, and deep down, he knew the source of it. That Thursday evening started like any other. Adrian was supposed to be in Austin for a late-night business meeting, but a cancelled client gave him an unexpected opportunity to return home early. As he pulled into the driveway, the dimly lit house appeared peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his heart. He stepped inside quietly, his keys jangling faintly in the stillness of the entryway. Then he heard it, laughter. Not just laughter, but her laughter. Sophia's laugh was something Adrian hadn't heard in months, at least not directed toward him. The sound came from the living room, light and carefree, as if she didn't have a care in the world. Another voice joined hers, a man's voice. Familiar. Too familiar. It was Matteo. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as he walked toward the living room. He paused just outside the doorway, his hand gripping the edge of the wall for support. Inside, he saw Sophia and Matteo sitting too close on the couch, her hand resting on her lap while Matteo leaned toward her, whispering something that made her laugh again. It wasn't an outright betrayal, not yet, but the intimacy between them was undeniable. When Adrian stepped into the room, the air shifted instantly. Sophia froze, her laughter dying in her throat, and Matteo's playful grin faltered. Adrian's presence loomed like a thundercloud, his dark eyes darting between his wife and his brother. "What's going on here?" Adrian's voice was calm, too calm, but the edge of anger beneath it was unmistakable. "Adrian, you're home early," Sophia stammered, her voice unsteady. She stood up quickly, as if putting distance between herself and Matteo could erase the unspoken truth hanging in the room. "I can see that," Adrian said, his gaze locking onto Matteo. "And you? What are you doing here, Matteo? I thought you had your own place." Matteo, ever the smooth talker, tried to defuse the situation. "I was just stopping by to help Sophia with some things around the house. You know, the usual." "The usual," Adrian repeated, his tone sharp. "Funny how the usual happens more when I'm not around." Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but the weight of Adrian's stare pinned her in place. The tension was suffocating, the room silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Adrian's mind raced. The stolen glances he'd noticed, the neighbors' whispered remarks, Sophia's distant behavior, all of it suddenly clicked into place. His suspicions hardened into certainty, and the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "How long?" Adrian's voice was low but heavy with emotion. He wasn't asking for clarification, he was demanding the truth. "Adrian, it's not," Sophia began, but Matteo cut her off. "Long enough," Matteo said defiantly, standing up. His tone was calm, but there was a glint of something darker in his eyes, arrogance, maybe even triumph. Sophia's head snapped toward Matteo, her eyes wide with panic. "Matteo, stop." "No, Sophia. Let's be honest for once," Matteo said, his voice rising. He turned back to Adrian, his expression hardening. "She deserves better than you. You've spent so much time chasing your career, you forgot to even notice her. What did you think would happen?" Adrian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You think this is my fault? You come into my home, betray my trust, and now you're blaming me? You betrayed her first," Matteo shot back. "By ignoring her, by treating her like a ghost in her own life. That doesn't justify what you've done." Adrian roared, stepping closer to Matteo. The two brothers stood face to face, the air between them crackling with tension. Sophia, caught in the middle, tried to intervene. "Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping." But neither man listened. Adrian's anger had reached a boiling point, and Matteo, emboldened by his own bitterness, refused to back down. "You've always had everything, Adrian," Matteo said, his voice dripping with resentment. "The perfect career, the perfect house, the perfect wife. But you never appreciated it. You never appreciated her. So yeah, maybe I stepped in where you failed." The words were like a match to dry kindling. Adrian lunged at Matteo, shoving him hard against the wall. The crash echoed through the house, and Sophia screamed, rushing forward to pull Adrian away. "Stop it," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to hurt each other." But Adrian's rage was uncontrollable, and Matteo, no longer the passive instigator, fought back with equal fury. The brothers grappled, their fists flying, years of buried resentment spilling out in brutal blows. In the chaos, Sophia tried to step between them, but Matteo's arm flung out wildly, knocking her to the ground. She fell with a sharp cry, her head hitting the edge of the coffee table. The sound of her body hitting the floor brought a sudden, chilling stillness to the room. Adrian froze, his fist mid-air, and Matteo staggered back, his chest heaving. Sophia lay motionless for a moment before letting out a weak groan, her hand clutching her temple. "Sophia!" Adrian dropped to his knees beside her, his anger replaced by panic. "Are you okay?" Sophia nodded faintly, her eyes filled with tears. "Please, just stop." But the moment of calm didn't last. Matteo, seething with frustration and guilt, wiped the blood from his split lip and snarled, "This isn't over." Adrian turned toward him, his voice like ice. "You're right. It's not. But you're done here, Matteo. You're done." The room fell into an uneasy silence, the fragile threads of their family unraveling before their eyes. None of them realized it yet, but this confrontation had set the stage for an even greater tragedy, one that would leave none of them unscathed. The night of the confrontation changed everything in the Delgado family. The living room, once a place of quiet solace, was now a battleground of betrayal and broken trust. Bloodstains from the scuffle marked the cream-colored rug, a haunting reminder of how far things had spiraled. But the worst was yet to come. After Sophia's fall, Adrian sat beside her, trembling. His anger had dissipated, replaced by a tidal wave of guilt and disbelief. He had always considered himself a man of control, someone who could handle any situation with composure. But tonight, he had lost that control entirely. As Sophia tried to sit up, her eyes red and swollen from tears, Adrian reached out to steady her. "Sophia, I didn't mean for this to happen," he murmured, his voice shaking. But Sophia didn't respond. She turned away from him, her hand clutching the side of her head where a bruise was already forming. The sight of her retreat, the wall she was now building between them, struck Adrian harder than any punch Matteo had landed. Matteo, standing by the doorway with a bloodied lip and a bruised cheek, broke the silence. "This isn't over, Adrian," he said, his tone venomous. "You think you've won? You haven't." Adrian shot him a glare that could cut glass. "Get out of my house." For once, Matteo didn't argue. He grabbed his keys from the counter and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house, leaving Adrian and Sophia alone in the suffocating silence. The next morning, Sophia woke to find Adrian already gone. He had left a note on the kitchen counter: "I need time to think. Stay here. We'll talk tonight." She stared at the words, her hands trembling, unsure whether she felt relief or despair. Adrian's absence left her alone with the weight of her guilt, her bruises, and the memories of the night before. As she stood by the window, gazing at the empty driveway, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Matteo: "Meet me at Stillwater. We need to talk." Her heart sank. She knew she shouldn't go, that seeing Matteo would only make things worse. But the unresolved tension between them, the need for closure, was too strong to ignore. When Sophia arrived at the lake, Matteo was already there, leaning against his car. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by something darker, resentment mixed with regret. "You shouldn't have come," he said as she approached. "You asked me to," Sophia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to apologize," Matteo admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I never meant for things to go this far. But Adrian, he's always had everything. And I just wanted, I don't know, something for myself." Sophia's chest tightened. "And you thought I was something to take from him?" Matteo flinched at her words. "No, Sophia. I care about you. I always have. But maybe I used that to justify everything I've done." Before Sophia could respond, the sound of tires crunching on gravel made them both turn. Adrian's car came into view, and he stepped out, his face a storm of emotions. He had found the note from Matteo in Sophia's phone, the final confirmation of what he had feared all along. "What the hell is this?" Adrian demanded, his voice trembling with rage as he strode toward them. "Adrian, stop." Sophia stepped between them, but the fire in Adrian's eyes was unrelenting. "This ends now," Adrian said, his fists clenching. He wasn't shouting anymore. His anger had condensed into something sharper, more dangerous. Matteo smirked bitterly. "What are you going to do, Adrian? Fight me again? Go ahead. You're good at that." It happened faster than Sophia could react. Adrian lunged at Matteo, and the two men collided in a flurry of punches. Matteo fought back this time, his own frustration and bitterness fueling his blows. Sophia screamed for them to stop, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. Then, suddenly, Matteo stumbled back, his hands clutching his chest. He gasped, his knees buckling as he fell to the ground. Adrian stood over him, his chest heaving, his knuckles bloodied. For a moment, no one moved. "Matteo?" Sophia's voice cracked as she dropped to her knees beside him. But he didn't respond. His body was still, his breathing shallow. Blood seeped through his shirt where Adrian's final punch had landed. Adrian staggered back, his face pale. No, I didn't mean to." The police arrived not long after, called by a hiker who had heard Sophia's screams. Adrian didn't resist as they placed him in handcuffs. He didn't fight, didn't speak, just stared blankly ahead as they led him to the patrol car. Sophia stayed behind, cradling Matteo's lifeless body as paramedics tried to revive him. But it was too late. Matteo Delgado was pronounced dead at the scene. The aftermath was devastating. Adrian was charged with manslaughter and taken to the county jail in Austin. The once proud businessman now faced a legal battle that would define the rest of his life. Sophia, meanwhile, was left to pick up the shattered pieces of her world. Back in Georgetown, the whispers began immediately. Neighbors who had once smiled and waved now crossed the street to avoid her. Sophia's parents, furious and ashamed, refused to take her calls. Her home, once a sanctuary, became a prison of guilt and regret. Every room reminded her of Adrian, of Matteo, of what she had destroyed. She replayed the events over and over in her mind, wondering if there was a moment she could have stopped it all, a choice she could have made differently. One evening, while cleaning out Matteo's belongings from the guest room, she found a letter tucked under his pillow. It was addressed to her. With trembling hands, she unfolded it. "Sophia. I don't know how this ends, but I know it won't end well. I've always cared about you, but I can't deny that part of me wanted to hurt Adrian. I wanted him to feel as small as I've felt my whole life. I'm sorry for dragging you into my mess. You deserve better than both of us." The words felt like a knife to her chest. Matteo's confession confirmed what she had feared. She was just as much a pawn in his game as she was in Adrian's. Months passed, and Sophia found herself utterly alone. Adrian was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Matteo was gone, his life cut short by his own bitterness and pride. And Sophia was left with nothing but the echoes of her choices. Sitting alone in her once beautiful home, Sophia realized the full weight of what had happened. The affair, the lies, the anger, they had destroyed everything. The cost of betrayal wasn't just the loss of love, but the loss of self. As she gazed out the window, watching the Texas sunset bleed across the horizon, Sophia whispered to no one, "If only I could go back." But there was no going back. Only the emptiness of a life she had helped unravel. The house was quiet, save for the faint creak of the old floorboards under Sophia's feet. She moved through the rooms aimlessly, the once warm and inviting home now feeling cold and hollow. Everything about it reminded her of what she had lost: the framed wedding photo on the mantel, now gathering dust, the faint scent of Adrian's cologne lingering in the bedroom, and the echo of Matteo's laughter in the living room. Each step felt heavier than the last as Sophia carried the weight of her guilt through the spaces that used to feel like a sanctuary. Months had passed since that terrible night by the lake, but time hadn't dulled the pain. If anything, it had sharpened it, carving deep scars into her heart. Matteo was gone, his life cut short by his own anger and Adrian's uncontrollable rage. Adrian, the man she once thought she would grow old with, was now serving a 10-year sentence for manslaughter. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. She had started her affair with Matteo to escape the loneliness in her marriage, only to end up completely alone. The whispers in Georgetown had quieted over time, but Sophia still felt the sting of judgment whenever she ventured outside. Neighbors who once waved and chatted over the fence now avoided her altogether. At the grocery store, she caught glimpses of people turning away, their whispers barely concealed. Even her closest friends had distanced themselves, unable to reconcile the woman they knew with the choices she had made. Her parents, who had been her rock in earlier years, had disowned her. Sophia could still hear her mother's voice trembling with anger the last time they spoke. "How could you, Sophia? You've disgraced this family. Don't call us again." Now, Sophia had no one. The once vibrant woman who laughed freely and dreamed of a life filled with art and love was now a shadow of her former self, trapped in a prison of her own making. One night, Sophia sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a glass of wine she hadn't touched. The dim light from the overhead lamp cast long shadows on the walls, mirroring the darkness in her thoughts. Her mind drifted to the last moments with Matteo, the desperation in his eyes, the regret in his voice as he confessed his intentions. "I wanted him to feel as small as I've felt my whole life." Those words haunted her. Matteo's actions had been driven by jealousy and resentment, emotions she now recognized in herself. She had betrayed Adrian not just out of loneliness but out of her own dissatisfaction and pride. She had blamed him for not seeing her, not valuing her, but had she ever truly communicated her feelings? Had she tried to bridge the growing chasm in their marriage, or had she chosen the easier, darker path? Her thoughts turned to Adrian. He had written her several letters from prison, each one a mix of apology and reflection. In his last letter, he had written, "I failed you, Sophia, and for that, I'll never forgive myself. But you failed us too. We both let the distance grow. We both let anger and neglect take over. I hope one day you'll find a way to forgive yourself, even if I can't." The tears came before she could stop them, hot and unrelenting. She clutched the letter to her chest, feeling the weight of Adrian's words. He was right. They had both failed, but her failures had cost them everything, each other, their future, and Matteo's life. As the days turned into weeks, Sophia tried to rebuild her life. She sold most of the furniture, unable to bear the sight of the couch where Matteo had once sat or the bed she had shared with Adrian. She donated her art supplies, the dreams of becoming an artist now feeling like a distant memory. But no matter how much she tried to erase the past, it lingered in every corner of the house. The whispers of what once was echoed in the halls, and the memories of that fateful night replayed in her mind like a cruel film reel. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Sophia stumbled upon an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, she saw snapshots of her and Adrian in happier times, at their wedding, on vacations, celebrating birthdays. Matteo was there too, grinning in the background, his arms slung casually around Adrian's shoulder. The photos captured a family that no longer existed, torn apart by lies, jealousy, and betrayal. She closed the album and sat down on the floor, her hands trembling. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, suffocating and inescapable. As the seasons changed, so did Sophia. The woman who once sought escape in the arms of another had finally begun to face herself. She started attending therapy sessions, peeling back the layers of her pain and guilt. It wasn't easy, and the road ahead felt impossibly long, but for the first time, Sophia allowed herself to hope. She couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, she could learn from it. On a cold winter evening, she stood on the porch of her now empty house, gazing at the Texas sunset. The oranges and purples of the horizon reminded her of the evenings she had shared with Adrian in their early years, back when love felt simple. She whispered to the wind, "I'm sorry. For everything." The apology wasn't just for Adrian or Matteo, it was for herself, for the woman she had been, and the woman she was trying to become. The story of Sophia, Adrian, and Matteo is a cautionary tale of how neglect, jealousy, and betrayal can destroy lives. It's a reminder that communication and honesty are the foundations of any relationship and that the choices we make in moments of weakness can have irreversible consequences. What do you think about Sophia's journey? Could she have made different choices to save her marriage? Was Matteo justified in his resentment, or was he simply selfish? And what about Adrian? Did his neglect pave the way for this tragedy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you interpret this complex web of love, betrayal, and redemption.